Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, good morning, good day, good night, whatever time it is, wherever you are that you're hearing the sound of my voice. Welcome to the Unstoppable Lionesses show. I am so stoked about this evening's show. Seriously. We're going to do things a little bit different. I have one of my lionesses that I'm gonna bring up that you're used to seeing, Miss Taffany Williams, and she normally comes on with her segment. But tonight we are going to have a conversation and we are going to just talk one with another other about the importance of sharing your story. You need lionesses to understand how important and how valuable your story is. And the importance of your story is one of Taffany's passions. So I am not going to keep her backstage any longer. Here she is, the queen herself. See her crowns and everything behind her. But welcome, ma'am. How are you?
I am good. I am doing so good. How are you today?
I'm incredible. I am incredible. You know, God is such a, oh my God, a strategic God. And
Mhm.
this is such a strategic time in which we find ourselves. Seriously. There is so much going on around us, so much going on in the world, so much going on if you are an American right here in the US of A. But the important thing is there's always so much going on in your personal life. There's
Mhm.
always things that we are addressing in our personal life. And what we fail to understand a lot of times is all of those peaks and valleys and trials and tribulations and manifestations and good things and sorrowful things, they all shape our story. They all shape who we are and who we're becoming. All right. And they are vital to the welfare of those around us and those that God is connecting to us. So I would like you to start the show off by just kind of sharing your heart on the literally, it is a ministry that God has given you to help people unlock the stories that they carry and the importance of them.
Most definitely. I have to back up and tell you how it was birthed because I think that a lot of times when we hear about things, it's like, oh, that's a great idea. And we don't really get the gravity of what it really means and how it was birthed. In 2012, I was going through a transition and I was in that space where I was spending a lot of intimate time with God and really just leaning into what it meant to be seeking first the kingdom of God. Like that was what I was leaning in. And as I was doing so, I had a vision. And in this vision, I was walking through a trail. It's kind of like a maze of holly hedges. And hollies have very thornful, like they're prickly.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
remember feeling pain down my left arm. And as I looked back down my left arm, I literally saw thorns. Now I was going through this maze, and at the end of the maze was a vein that I was trying to get to. But when I saw the thorns, I realized that was the pain that I was feeling. So I tried to pull the thorns out. It hurt so bad to try to pull them out, but when I let them go, it hurt even worse to leave them in. And so I struggled and I got all those thorns out. And I got to the path, the opening where I was right there by the van that I was getting ready to go into. And there were people and they were snickering and pointing and talking to each other or whatever. And I was like, I know I got all those thorns out. And I looked at my right arm and there were thorns down the back of my right arm as well. And it was such a painful experience. I was like, oh, I got to come up out of this. And I was able to, quote unquote, wake myself up out of that vision. So I asked the Lord, what is this about? And he said that in your ministry, vehicles are always a representation of ministry.
Yep.
In your ministry, your past is going to show up. And it's only juicy gossip if somebody is telling something that's already been told.
Mm.
Your story matters. Your story is going to be things that other people have dealt with that they don't want to talk about. And you have got to birth this thing through honesty, openness, and transparency. So I talk all the time about being hot, honest, open, and transparent. And it's about sharing the journey. We all
Mm,
have our own specific journeys that were designed sometimes for us, and sometimes there are things that just happen.
mhm,
And we get to take those pieces of our story and share them with other people so that we can be a face of hope to someone who is either going through it right now
mhm,
or has gone through it and like thinking
mhm,
they're the only one. So they're
mhm,
hiding behind shame and guilt and rejection and abandonment and all of the stuff that nobody wants to talk about. And when fast forward to the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, and I started to see different places where the Lord had told me, okay, you got to birth this through transparency. I had to come forth, I mean, even with my divorce. And would you marry you? That is
mhm,
all my story. It's what God
mhm,
took me through. And
mhm,
it birthed a whole movement, TV show, book, conferences, retreats, counseling, coaching, you name it. It birthed all of that. But it was about me telling my story.
mhm,
Left abusive relationships.
mhm,
Marriages came back together. Bad marriages became better. There were so many things, so much true testimony that has come from me sharing my story because it's other things that other people don't want to talk about.
mhm,
Even when it came to writing the book, my first book was A Journey to Truth. It was disowning the lies that I believed about myself based on traumatic experiences through life.
mhm.
Being open, being honest, and being transparent in those spaces. So now, like you say, I help people to learn how to tell you for optimal impact.
Mhm.
Impact can be a change there again, somebody leaving an abusive relationship, dealing with daddy issues,
Mhm.
understanding soul ties, removing the mask, becoming authentically who they are in Christ,
Mhm.
understanding they are his baby girls or baby boys, getting into that sonship. I talk about ships all the time.
Right,
Getting into
right.
that sonship so that they can know that they are in the kingdom fighting the opposite. They're not fighting for the earth as
Mhm.
it is in heaven. So, learning how to tell your story, whether it be in a book, learning how to tell it, whether it be from a stage, or as you know, I'm in the film world. If you're telling it as a documentary, or even short films, or even tell our story so that we can be a cloud of witnesses and a face of hope to other people.
You know what I found writing my story, and my book just came out actually. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Snapshots of my life. But it just came out. But it was a journey. I started writing this book in 2008.
Mhm.
And what I tell people is the pages of my computer or my notebook where I was doing notes or whatever, they became my therapist because I went from conception. I went all the way back. I went all the way back to being an orphan, given away at birth, and all of the different things I walked through. Even like what you were saying, I went through the daddy issues of losing my father at 7 years old because he passed away, and going from there to looking for that male affirmation in all the wrong places, which led to two teenage pregnancies. Um, and there was so much that I covered in walking through the different trials and the different aspects of my life that when it was finally published, it was really funny because in 2019, I was one chapter away from finishing it. I had 28 chapters. I was working on the last chapter. And then this is what was really interesting to me. I remember hearing with inside myself, I need to back this up because the enemy will try to steal this. I remember clearly hearing that. And Taffany, I cannot tell you what happened because I remember going to Dropbox. I remember Google Docs. It was too big to email to myself. I remember going through all of these places to get this book backed up. And the very next week, my computer and external hard drive was stolen. And all I could find backed up was the first 17 chapters of the
Oh,
book
wow.
because I had sent that to someone probably a year and a half previous to that, to kind of do some proofreading for me. And so it devastated me. And I was just like, I don't have the energy to walk through this again. And now, at that time, mind you, I had probably written 4 books since I had started writing this one.
Mm-hmm.
Because this one was different, you know, this one was me. And it made a tremendous difference. And I would write on it for a little while and put it away, write it for a little while. And it was like, okay, enough of that. Because you relive the different traumas that you walk through, you know. But it became therapeutic to do it. So fast forward from 2019, I did nothing with it. It was like, to me, it was a done deal. And it was like, God, I guess the purpose of it was therapy and what have you. But then last year, someone said, Colette, you got to write this book. You got to finish the book. You've got to finish the book. I literally had someone prophesy to me in a church setting, not knowing anything about the book, not knowing anything about my story and how my story had flipped and whatever. And he said, God said, there's books in you. He said, but there is one book in particular that is a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I started laughing because I knew exactly what he was talking about. And he's like, you've got to finish that book. And he knew nothing about what had transpired, right? And I started laughing. And so then another friend of mine had came and said, she was just like, Colette, you got to finish this. And she introduced me to Leeds Publishing because I'd always self-published all of my works. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is my first actual published piece that I didn't publish myself. And it literally is a movie, as you know, because Taffany is like, yeah, we're going to make this movie.
Oh, yeah. It's
But
going down.
it was time. It was so funny. A couple of months ago, and it was time for it to be released. And I had to stop and think to myself, I was like, okay, Lord, are we really doing this? Because there are things in the book that I haven't really shared, you know? And as I thought about it, I was just like, yeah, we're doing it. Okay. Because you've known me for a little while. I'm a pretty transparent person anyway. So, I don't have a problem sharing my story, certain parts of it, but certain parts have just been, hey, they were just there.
I feel you.
Wait, I tell people there's other parts that don't nobody but me and Jesus know, and we're gonna keep it that way.
Hello? What you said.
Woo! But here's the key: the transparency within the story. I know that there are so many people out there that have walked the journey and think that they walked it alone. They don't understand. They don't understand the depths that you will go to make sure that your children eat. They don't understand the depths that you will go through when you're walking in that place of bitterness and you allow that bitterness to take over your life. They don't, they don't understand that what you see today, Dr. Coylette, Elder Coylette, okay, this is me at 68 years old. This was not me at 28. Okay. Seriously.
Yeah.
And the one thing that really bothers me about people is when they hide behind who they've become.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not transparent about who they were. All right. This is one thing that my grandchildren have the honor of never knowing me unsaved. I got saved 1 month before my oldest grandson was born. He's 36. My children have a different story.
Facts. And I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. Like even with my children, I have literally, and I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I remember having all four of my children together and literally saying, please forgive me for allowing someone to raise you that had no clue who she was, because I didn't have a clue. I did what the best that I knew to do at that particular time. In my head, I did better than my biological mom had done because she didn't raise me. So when we think that we've done better than, so if we're not, if the other side of that scale is not God and His, whatever. But it's true. My kids have seen me unsaved. They've not just seen me unsaved. They see me walking in ministry and then back out in this.
Back
I
out in
mean,
the world.
yes, yes. So it's like, okay, how long is this gonna last? You know what I'm saying? Like, and understanding how they felt that way. I mean, they don't feel that way now, but back in the day, because I did, in ministry for 12 years and had, a marriage fall apart and just I kind of lost it for a minute. It didn't take me long to get it back, but at any point they saw that. And so, like you say, my first book took me 7 years to write as well. I mean, it took me a long time. And it was because every time I would get to a certain point, I'd realize I still have trauma there. Like there was still triggers as I was writing.
Right.
Like there was triggers where I'd have to like walk away from it and deal with the fact that I was pissed. I was hurt. Like I was angry and had to work through that thing before I could even start writing the next chapter or even finish up the chapter that I was writing at that time. It's real. And people, I think that that's one of the reasons why people don't write their story, is because they have to revisit what it
Yes.
is that they're like, who wants to deal with that again? I got over it. And you're not really over
But
it.
you're not over it. That's it. Yes. You're not over it.
You're not. And like you said, and it even took me going to school to become a counselor. I'm a pastoral counselor, licensed pastoral counselor. And it was in that I realized that I had codependency issues. I always thought that codependency was when somebody always got to have somebody there to lean on. But the flip side of that is always being the one that needs someone to need you.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful.
It's a flip side. So, as an quote unquote empath, you get attracted to, unfortunately, narcissistic people because they can use that in you, that you see the best in them, that you feel like you can help them. You're somebody's savior. Whether you had to grow up too fast, which was my case, whatever the reason is, it still was stuff that I was bumping into and I was seeing the cycles. Like I was repeating cycles in my life. And then I got to feeling embarrassed that I had fallen for the same thing again. I started to get, the shame and the guilt that comes along with it. So, like you said, every step of the way. So I can only imagine what it would feel like to have written 10 or 12 chapters and then lose that and have to go through it all over again. Whew.
I was just like, no, I'm not doing this. but here's the strategic plan of God. Because the ending of the book completely transcended and changed.
Oh, I bet it did.
I lost it in 2019. Okay. I lost 10 chapters. I had 28 chapters done. And I lost 10 chapters. But here's the deal. In 2020, I found out who my biological father was, which took my story to a whole nother level. Once we started uncovering that saga, who he was, how he died, okay, all of the things around that made now all of a sudden my story sensationalized, was like, okay, God, you got jokes. It was like, oh, no. See, you needed to see another transition within your life before you could finish this story. Okay. Because there's other things that needed to come to light. which was really, really amazing to me. One of the things that, we've been talking about, you and I, is walking through that trauma and overcoming it. So I am 68 years old. Last year at 67, I started really trying to understand my survivalist instinct.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I've been a survivor all my life. And I was one of those Malcolm X survivors by any means necessary.
Okay.
I got to do what I got to do. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And even in my transition to loving the Lord with all my heart, to have an extremely strong faith life and what have you, I still, in my core, had to come to terms with, I still had that survivalist nature.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I had to trace back to find out where it came from. See, this is another reason why your story is so important. Okay. Because you can't face it if you can't trace it.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
You can't face it if you can't trace it. And so at a retreat, Mercy Ministries, I was at a Mercy Ministries retreat, and we were digging into our past and what was that one thing that you knew you had to deal with, but you had not. And that was my thing. And I could not, and I was just like, okay, so I had children young, I had to take care of them, I had to walk through this, that, and the other. I left home at 17 with 2 babies. Just, you know what you think, but that still did not give me the root of my survivalist instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Taffany, I had to trace that thing all the way back to when my father died.
Mm-hmm.
And the feeling of I no longer was protected.
Yep. I was getting ready to say that lack of safety. I'm telling you.
No longer protected. So at 7 years old,
Wow.
I developed that survivalist instinct. Now, my mother was a fierce woman, but she was also fierce toward me. So, and my father was my protector from her. And there was no more protection.
Wow.
Okay. And that was when I walked into that mode. So this is why it's so important to face your story before you can really deal with your story and allow your story to help somebody else. You got to face your story.
100%. I was telling someone, that book really started as my healing journal. It was never supposed to be a book. That wasn't my intention.
Mm-hmm.
It was a journal that I used as my healing space because I had to go back and figure out, when did I lose my voice? When did I lose my ability to feel safe?
Mm.
When did I lose my ability to feel? Because I numbed a lot. And that's been probably one of the safety and the numbing have been things that I have continued to have to apply the blood of Jesus, his perfect love over those areas in my life, because perfect love drives away fear.
Right.
And so, I'm like, okay, Lord, where have I not applied your perfect love? Because I don't feel safe. And so literally walking through those spaces or whatever, and I didn't meet my father until I was 30 years old. And when I met him and I was telling him about some of the challenges that I had faced, I had a good life overall, but everybody has some type of childhood trauma. And so as I was telling him about that, he was like, where's the book? He said, if no one had ever written about Martin Luther King, how would you know who he is?
Wow.
If nobody had ever written about Jesus or told that story, how would you know who he is?
Truth.
You got to tell the story. And he was like, it's unfair of you, the words he used, because he was very blunt. How
Is that where you get it from?
Girl, I have no idea. I don't know what you're talking about. What it is. He said, how selfish of you is it for someone's healing to be sitting on your hard drive? How do you sleep? And I was like, that was mean.
Wow.
So from that point forward, every time it was truth. Every time we would get on the phone, where's the book? Where's the book? Where's the book? And I was like, but I said that to say the first version was for me. It was for me. It was my healing. It
Mhm.
was I didn't think about how I could help nobody. That was the furthest thing from my mind.
Mhm.
It was for me. It was my healing. It was coming to grips with who I believed I was
Mhm.
because of things that had happened.
Mhm.
Some things I had done,
Mhm.
some things had been done to me. It was all of the stuff. I was kidnapped at 4 years old by gunpoint. They tried to abort me while my mom was pregnant with me. My mom was 13 when she got pregnant. I mean, there were so many things. So that feeling and seed of abandonment for me happened in the womb.
Mhm.
So it went back further than that. So he had to take me back to my first abusive relationship, then back to 9 years old, then back to 12 years old when my grandfather passed away with the safety piece.
Mhm.
All of these different things to get to that point. But that first draft was for me. Then I could write that next draft that was for somebody else to even
Mhm.
read.
Mhm.
Because it was raw. It was, listen, it was for real.
I understand.
It was for real. And, I'm adopted as well within the family, but, being angry at my adopted mom, like I felt guilty about being angry because she took me when what appeared that nobody else wanted me. You were this unwanted
Mhm.
child. So
Mhm.
there is so much that goes into telling your story.
Yeah.
But like you said, you has to be told from a place of a healed and whole person. That's how you can talk about the not Elder Colette.
Right. Right.
That's
Right.
why, because that
Yeah.
ain't who you are anymore.
Right.
Because you're healed.
Exactly. And here's something really, really important is to not allow the judgment of others to cause you to take that place back on.
Hmm.
You know, we were laughing and talking before the broadcast, and I was like, I've been warning people. I was like, yeah, there's some stuff in this book, some stuff that you aren't really prepared for. I promise you, but it's okay because, like you said, I know who I was, and I was unapologetic in who I was
Right.
at that point in time. So now, because God has done such a magnificent work within and through and still working on me, I don't have to own that stuff any
Mhm.
longer. All
Yeah.
right. So it's important that when you guys start to share your story, people will try to judge you. They'll think of you in different manners. I remember this was a year ago this Christmas because I had come home. I was living in Atlanta at the time. I had come home for Christmas to Vegas and did a shut in while I was here. And in the shut in, there was a group of women in there, and we were chatting and we were talking. And I told a snippet of my story. And instantly, you could feel the atmosphere shift. And you could feel, I could literally see people looking at me like, what? Because it was a snippet that they did not know.
Hmm.
But in that moment, it was like, well, yeah, that's the hey, it is what it is. I did what I did.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not boasting on it at this point of my life, but I'm also not walking in shame behind it.
100%. And, I believe that is a lot of times what keeps people from talking about what's real. I can my adopted mom was 38 years old when I was born, so she was an elder. She
Mhm.
was older. It wasn't like she was in her 20s or early 30s when I was born. So I came up with my elders, with my great grandfather, who biologically great grandfather, legally grandfather because of the adoption. But because of that, you don't know what happened in those days. A lot of things that, as I was walking through my story, and I was like, had a molestation at 9, my adopted mom's brother. And I was like, I felt like she didn't protect me because he was still allowed to be around and all this. Whether she said something to him, threatened to kill him, I don't know. I don't know. But all I can talk about is how I felt, because that's what I was dealing with. I was dealing with the soul healing at that point, my inner healing. So you have to be real, regardless of what the facts may be. You have to deal with the truth. And the truth was, I felt unprotected. So in that space, it was like, after I got through that healing piece, the Lord let me see that there's a strong possibility that the same thing happened to her. And for that reason, she didn't know how to handle the situation, or she handled it the best way she knew how.
Right.
There could have been some fear in there. There could have been so the Lord started to show me. And so I asked the question, because that's just who I am. If I want to know, my grandmama was like that. You want to know something, you ask. All they can say is no, or it ain't your business. I mean, and you'd have heard both of them, and neither one of them killed you. Just ask the question, right? So I said, hey, you didn't think, I don't know why you always dealing in people's past, dealing with things in the past. Which, by her not saying yes or no, let me know.
Yeah.
But
that was your answer. That was your answer.
That was the only answer I needed. I didn't need no more, nothing else from there. There was a time back then, what goes on in this house stays in this house. There were all those things. So things were not talked about, so they couldn't be dealt with. Like you said, what did you say? You can't trace it. You can't face it if you can't trace it.
If you can't trace it, you can't face it.
So, I don't want that to be my kid's story. I don't want that to be my grandkids' story either. I have sat down and had conversations with my kids about a lot of stuff that most people be like, you talk to your kids about that?
Yep.
Yes, I do. Because I don't want them walking around in shame and guilt. If there's something that's going on, like, I am so thankful my grown kids still come to me and talk to me about some things that they talk to me about. Now, mind you, it may hit me sideways, and I may have to stop and think about what I'm getting ready to say, because I'm like, okay, all right, so I have to collect my thoughts.
Right.
But because we're able to be open and transparent, if they have an emotion or a feeling, like, they will literally say, you made me feel this way when you said this. And I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. You know what I'm saying? Or they're able to open up. How can we heal? What's hidden can't be healed.
Exactly.
And so telling our stories, as much as it may seem shameful, or we may have guilt behind it or whatever, if it's kept on the inside, it is constantly eating away at our confidence, at our boldness, at our future, at our mindset, at our soul, our mind, our thoughts, our heart, our emotions, our motives, all of the stuff. So getting it out is so powerful. And I love your story. I don't love the fact that you lost the 10 chapters, but
there was a reason. God had a plan.
He had a whole plan that you didn't have a clue about.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the power in the finishing. I remember somebody saying, "You're not finished with that book yet," and then I was like, "Lord, why am I not finished?" He said, "Because the story ain't finished." I was like, okay. When it gets finished, you'll finish it.
Here's my thing. I'm looking forward to Snapshots of My Life Part 2.
Facts, because it don't stop.
One was like, woo, woo. And so now it's like, Lord, you literally have taken my life and just made a pivot in it to a whole different area and arena. And I'm just like, okay, now, Lord. And but I had to stop and think. So I was I'm 68. I was 64 when I found out who my biologicals were. And it was the same question. Now, Lord.
Yeah.
I looked for over 40 years. I wasn't looking for my biological DNA planter. I was looking for my mama because I wanted her to know I was all right. I always wanted to thank her and say, you did good. You gave me life. Thank you for giving me life. I did not get an opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, when I found out who she was, she had passed. But that was my goal. No clue that the crux of my story would be what it was, because my father died in Jonestown, Guyana, and was part of Jim Jones' security team. In fact, there's FBI records saying he was the head of Jim Jones' security team. Okay. And just took my story to a whole nother level. Like,
Right.
like he
Right.
was,
Right.
but then
Gave a whole new understanding to don't drink the Kool-Aid, huh?
girl, wait, let me tell you. When I started sharing with my daughter what I found out, she was like, Mama, do you realize that the whole time Coy and I were growing up, you would always tell us don't drink the Kool-Aid? So, and I would. It was the truth. So to my children, don't drink the Kool-Aid equated to my mother was like, you know, if your friends jump off a cliff, you're gonna jump off the cliff with them. That was
right.
a rendition of it. My rendition is because Jonestown had happened and everybody drank the Kool-Aid, don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Like, yeah.
You know how real it really was.
Right. Right.
Kool-Aid, you know. And then as I started learning about my biological and everything, I was like, oh boy, drank the Kool-Aid before he drank the Kool-Aid. Like,
he
what?
drank the Kool-Aid. Well, yeah.
So, but here's the crux of it. Your story is as equally valuable to you as it is to others. See, what Tiffany and I are sharing here is how we had to walk through our own story systematically and allow the healing of God in our hearts, in our psyches, in our emotions, before we could adequately take that story and be a blessing to you. Mm-hmm. So you've got to face and trace your story for yourself. First of all, what did Tiffany say? Her first draft was for her. Raw and real. Mm-hmm. Raw and real. It will take time to dissect your story because you need to heal. And here's another important thing that the Lord just dropped in my spirit. You need to know things are there that you've masked.
100%. I had absolutely no idea. And, you know, even as I was getting older, I'm 53. So even within the last 5 years or so, when I started asking the Lord, okay, God, I've done this, I've done that, because I've had several different career paths. And I'm like, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? I got a glimpse of me at around, it looked like I was maybe around somewhere between 7 and 9 years old. And I was standing up in the bed and I was like doing the you know, what was his name? John Travolta. Like I was just like
Saturday Night Live dance,
Saturday Night Fever or Live or whatever the dance. Yeah.
Saturday Night Fever. Yeah, that's what it was.
And I mean, I can still see my face. I was just lit up. Like I was like, I'm on a stage. Look at me. Here I am. You know, it was this. And I was like, where did that little girl go? Where did that little girl go? That could take on the world. Mm-hmm. Even at her age. She was fearless. Mm-hmm. She was tenacious. She was a warrior. Yeah. She was an intercessor. She always interceded between. I mean, I was just like, and he just showed me that. Like, because I kept saying, I never thought about being an actor or being on stage or anything like that. And he's like, yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Yes, you did. You were on a platform. You were on a stage in the middle of your bed. Like you. And I was like, oh my gosh. So when you said, you know, snapshots of your life part 2, listen, we are on a journey that we will not complete until we cross over into glory. Right. We go from glory to glory. So there is just so much power in the continual healing. It took me to a whole nother level of healing just this past weekend, sis.
Okay.
I'm driving back from Virginia, and he showed me a slither. I literally saw a slither that I still felt unsafe in.
Mm.
And I said, Lord, show me where that is and heal it. And so I literally saw like red thread that was wrapped in Jesus's blood going
Wow.
down, and like you would stitch up something and stitching up that space, because the next space that he's taking me in desires and needs another layer of healing. So even
Mm.
as we're telling our stories, and we can be at a healed space at that level that we're at right then, and he will continue to heal us
Mm.
as we're sharing. And it's just a glorious and beautiful thing to walk even closer and in more and more intimate, safe place to lay our head on our daddy's chest. Like,
Yes.
it's beautiful,
Mm.
beautiful that he will never leave us where we're at.
Mm-mm.
He's always calling us deeper and deeper within,
Mm.
deeper and deeper with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we tell our stories, it said, as they went, Jesus showed up.
Okay.
As we're
Then shall
doing
you
it.
know as you go. As you
So,
follow on to follow him. You know, it's listen, let me tell you, my spiritual grandfather, he's gone on to glory now, but he preached a sermon once that revolutionized my life.
mm,
And he said it was all part of the storyline.
mm,
It was all part of the storyline. And he used Jacob as an example. We give Jacob a bad rap. He was
mhm.
a supplanter. He fooled his daddy. All of these different things. He tricked his brother and all of that. If you really, really read Jacob's story, Jacob wasn't a bad guy. He didn't trick his brother. His brother straight out gave him his birthright because he wanted some soup.
Right.
He didn't trick him. He said, I'll give it to you if you give me your birthright. He said, okay, you can have it. Give me the soup.
Right. I'm gonna
All
die
right.
anyway.
When it came to him and Isaac, his mama told him what to do.
Yeah.
His mama told him what to do. Now, think about this, Tiffany. When he and Esau was in his mama's womb, God told her then that the
Yeah.
younger shall rule over the elder. God set the plan in motion. It was part of his storyline for him to get the blessing of the firstborn, even though he was the secondborn.
Yeah.
What if you have been so hard on yourself all of these years because of choices you've made, things that have been done, and it was just all part of your
The
storyline?
storyline. Jesus.
All part of
Jesus.
your storyline. Like where I could really be tripping that I was a mother at 14, a second time 8 days after I turned 16. And and it was like in the hardness of life and going through all of these. And it was like, no, boo, that was just part of your storyline. Because once you got in your 20s, you wouldn't gonna have no babies. I wouldn't have.
Well,
If I hadn't had them when I had them, I wouldn't have had any.
I wouldn't have either. I tell people all the time, I was 16 when I got married. I had all 4 of my kids by the time I was 22 years old, and had to have an emergency hysterectomy at 25.
Mine was at 32. Mine was at
So
32.
I wouldn't have had kids.
Wouldn't have.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like
My life was in a whole nother place. Children was like, okay, I had children, so they were on my mind. But talking about more, oh no, you done bumped your head. Ain't gonna be no more.
never. Yeah. Because
So it's all
without,
part of your storyline. I needed to be given away at birth because I needed the mother and the father that God chose to rear me in my life.
100%. 100%. 100%.
Okay, sis, we are running out of time. I need you to tell them about the workshop that you have coming up dealing with your story.
Yes. So I have a workshop coming up, how to tell your story for optimum influence, impact, and income, because we can take our stories, our books, go and start coaching people, mentoring people that are walking through things that we were walking through. And whether we want to tell it from a stage, tell it from a story, what we will have when you finish this workshop is a blueprint and outline of writing your story, creating your first ebook, writing a script to create your signature talk or to create your documentary or short film or origin story that can then turn
When
around
is
in
it? You got 10 seconds. When is it?
December the 15th.
How do they log in?
Log into Taffany.com and you'll be able to find it there.
We did it. That's it. That's it. Let me end.